Good afternoon, Michael Malice here, and let that be your welcome for the next hour. I am giddy about our guest today, Ben Howe, whose book, The Immoral Majority, comes out today.
That's right.
And I got to tell you, as a fellow author, it gives me a huge thrill to be able to talk to someone on the day of their book release, because I know how hard it is to break out a book, and you notice everyone who buys it and sends you a picture, and you notice the people who don't care. So if you are in a position, to everyone in the audience, and your buddy has a book coming out, buy the book, send them a note. They will notice. It will mean a lot, because it's a lot of work. I am glad to recommend this book. I read it all weekend. It's very thought-provoking. Let me give you your background. You are a evangelical Christian, conservative.
Yes.
You were fired, by your own words, from Red State because, from your opinion, you were too critical of President Trump.
Correct.
This book is critical of President Trump, but it's more critical of Trumpism.
Yes.
So you're not coming at it, Trump's the devil. You freely acknowledge that Trump has done good things, which I think a lot of the anti-Trump people often seem to have a problem doing, which to me seems intellectually dishonest.
Absolutely.
And you're like, all right, do you want to do the summary of the book, or should I? Like, which do you prefer? Guest choice.
No, I like hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, that's what I enjoy, because when you write a book, you don't know how people are going to perceive it.
No, absolutely.
So this is the argument you make in the book. All right, starting point is...
Wrong. No.
This book is wrong. We'll get to where I disagree.
We'll get to why it's wrong later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone knows what Trump is. There's no misconceptions about that. Evangelical Christians, Christian conservatives, are supposed to hold themselves to higher moral standards. If they had just said, all right, he's a bad guy, but he's doing bad things, we're holding our nose for him, you could wrap your head around that.
Absolutely.
But they're not. What they're doing is they're presenting him as the second coming. They're pretending that these things that they had previously and personally regarded as horrible now regard as not just excusable, but admirable. And this is the one population that should know better and does know better. There's no excuse to be like, oh, well, we didn't know this kind of behavior is wrong. And not only is that bad for Christianity, Christian conservatism in America in the short term, it's really bad in the long term, because how are you going to be a moral high ground? How are you going to attract people to your vision of America if you are playing into the worst accusations of hypocrisy and moral, I don't know if depravity is the word you would use, but moral sin, certainly, that you claim to be against?
Right. The fundamental issue for me was never whether or not somebody chose. I know lots of people, I'm friends with lots of people who voted for Trump. The people that I get along with the easiest are the ones who I feel like are a little open-eyed about it.
Yeah.
Most people in 2016, when I said I wasn't going to vote for him, there was a lot of understanding. There was a lot of, hey, I get it. And, you know, they said, look, we're going to hold this guy accountable. And I think that perhaps a lot of them thought accountability was policy related. So we're going to hold him accountable in the sense we want to make sure that he fulfills our policy objectives. But those weren't really ever the objections to Trump by conservatives anyway. The objections were about who he was, how he was, the way he handled things, and the concerns of what that would do for our perception around the world. I feel reasonable people can disagree on whether or not that is what he does or has done. But when people start to rationalize behaviors because they're more concerned about winning, and you're allegedly answering to a higher moral law, I find that hypocritical. If a person doesn't subscribe to a higher moral law, you know, let's say somebody is supremely atheist and they believe that morality is something that humans have adopted for whatever good reasons, but there isn't some all-powerful creator dictating it. Well, then that's a much easier pragmatism for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
These guys aren't saying that. Christians are saying that there is an absolute truth, an absolute moral law that is dictated by a sentient being, and they're defying those in order to win, as though that all-powerful sentient being needs their help.
There's like 10, if you ask anyone, like, what are like 10 Christian catchphrases, right? What would Jesus do? We won them. But the one that you talk about in the book is, I'm going to bungle the quote, apologies, because I'm not a Christian. But what you gave...
Wait, what?
You gave...
What? No,
the doors are locked from the outside. This is the Lion's Den, baby. No. What's the quote about gaining the world but losing your soul?
Oh, what does it profit a man to gain the world but lose his soul?
Yeah, that is like the textbook Christian quote that you have to think not just long term, but in terms of the afterlife.
It's in 2 Corinthians.
Yeah,
No,
even I knew that. So you mentioned this in the book that things that if Barack Obama had referred to 2 Corinthians as 2 Corinthians, Twitter would have lost its mind, and understandably. And
this is one of those things where. There's this flattening lack of nuance in a lot of things these days. And so the 2 Corinthians thing is a good example because I do reference it in the book. And I think a lot of Christians would come at me if they didn't read what was written around it because, he was handed a note. It was written by, I can't remember who it was written by, but it was written by an evangelical. And he's just reading off the note. And the way it was written was 2 Corinthians, and he just read it all. I think anybody could have made that mistake.
I don't agree with you.
But I will say that part of the issue is why does he get the benefit of the doubt on this? Or why he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt on this is because of the context of everything else that he's said and done.
Well, there's also something very bizarre. Like when Obama misspoke and said there's 57 states and people are like, haha, he's so dumb. I'm like, do you really think Obama doesn't know how many states there are? It's a very weird gotcha that when, and like this, but that's the other thing. There is this. So one of the things that you have.
If he had been constantly missing the amount of states.
Sure, right. Yeah.
Then it would be difficult to say it was just a mistake. And I guess that's what I'm saying about Trump. It's like, sure, he could have just made a mistake. But it's a lot of mistakes, like in the same way.
One of the things that you have an issue with Trump that I think is one of his best qualities, and let's talk about this, is his divisiveness.
Yes.
That he is basically turning what had been political opponents into political enemies. He uses that verbiage. He's increasing hostility, not just between Republican and Democrat, but within Republican Party against other Republicans, as you have seen. We'll get to that in a second. And you think this is a major flaw of his?
Yes. Well, there's a foundational thing to consider there, which is when I'm talking about Christians specifically, this is something that you are taught. Like, and people often reference to me, especially Christians, when I talk about this. Turn the other cheek doesn't mean lay down and let somebody harm you. But it does also specify in other verses that you should not return evil with evil, that you should, if you have to defend yourself, you must be on the right side morally. So, like, just as an illustration, if you're a Nazi in World War II and you're defending your own life as the Americans come in, and they're about to shoot you, and so you defend yourself, that is morally fine. But if you are defending a death camp, then it's not. And so my issue with Trump is religiously based, because I will say, and I think I say this like several times throughout the book, barring these moral considerations, pragmatically, why wouldn't you be in a war with each other? Why wouldn't you want to win at any cost? Like, I wouldn't think there would be a good argument. If survival of the fittest rules all of history, then I'm definitely in the way with me saying that there's this moral high ground that has to be achieved.
Why does every single guest in this show end up defending the Nazis? What is? I mean,
well, I have some German blood in me, so I just feel like
one of the things, though, that you point out here is you make it a point to say that people like Mitt Romney and John McCain were morally good people, while Donald Trump in his personal life are morally bad people. And let's talk about that a little bit, because I don't agree. I think Mitt Romney especially is really a morally reprehensible person.
It does get complicated to explain, because I don't want to make it sound as though I'm saying Romney is a paragon of humility and everything we should aspire to be. But I would say he and George W. Bush, for instance, they're both guys that I feel confident at least believe what they're working for is a good thing, even if they continually may do things I disagree with. Romney, I was against when he was running for purely political reasons, but I did not doubt that what he was saying he thought was best was what he thought was best. I don't get that from Trump. What I get from Trump is I'm going to do what's best for me in this exact moment, and I don't care about consequences for anyone else. And I just don't feel like that's Romney.
I don't think Mitt Romney has any political principles whatsoever.
Political principles?
Yes.
I think he has no. I mean, because I've said this about him. I called him the Etch-a-Sketch.
Okay,
like,
so we're on the same page.
Yes,
we're on the same page.
But I don't consider somebody's squishiness on policy to be a moral issue.
Okay, that's a fair answer. One of the things that I found really interesting, you have an introduction which everyone should read. And I don't know why it wasn't chapter 1 because it was so interesting. It
was too religious. Well, I was trying to keep the more prayerful aspects in the introduction and the afterword.
Well, there's a question I have to ask you. I'm sorry if it sounds a little condescending. Do you appreciate how lucky you are to have the dad that you did?
Absolutely.
Because reading this, I mean, he by all rights he should have thrown you out of the house.
Yes.
And the fact that he, mentored you and stuck by you, really. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people who are blessed with having such a great dad take that for granted.
Oh, they do.
Can you tell that story?
Sure. As a teenager, I did the pothead route, and I dropped out of high school. I became a dealer. I was just like a terrible. It was I don't know what statutes of limitations are on everything. So we'll just say it was certain drugs.
Okay.
And
pills.
I had a business.
Can you get me some shrooms?
Are you basically asking me for LSD right now?
I said shrooms. LSD's too strong. Anyway, go ahead.
But it's better money. Anyway.
Yes.
And there's no cows involved, which is an important aspect for me.
They grow it in labs now.
Well, yeah, they got the rice ones now too.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about drugs.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Have you ever tried DMT?
No, actually, I haven't. But I do remember one time among my friends, we were talking about drugs we wouldn't do. And we were all like, no, ice. No, we're not going to. No, never going to. Remember ice? Condensed form of crack that was around.
I never even heard of this. Yeah. Oh, man, you're hardcore, Ben Howe.
And so we were talking about, no, we wouldn't do it. Everybody got quiet. My friend Wes just goes, I mean, maybe it's like a little bit. Just try it out, And we're all like, yeah, okay, yeah. One hit.
What a great name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know if it's still around anymore, but it apparently is one of the ones that attributed when you saw zombies, people doing zombies. Yeah. It was ice.
I love Ben Howe comes in here, evangelical Christian. 5 minutes in, he's a hipster drug dealer.
Right.
Yeah, there's this drug. You probably never heard of it. Yeah, they don't make it anymore. But back in the day,
day when I was slinging,
slinging ice. They call me the Iceman.
Right. They call me Snow, actually. But
Informer.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, so you were dealing. You drop out of high school. Your dad is what's the term? Preacher?
No, he was no longer a pastor at that point.
Okay.
He was a Southern. He still is. He's a professor at a Southern Evangelical Seminary.
But he was a very learned man when it comes to religion.
Yes.
That was his degree. This is something that he practiced in his personal life. And you were, in a sense, I'm going to bungle the metaphor, but the prodigal son.
Yes.
And he practiced what he preached.
Yes.
So I mean,
they object now. I mean, I don't know if you've ever complimented your parents in front of others.
Oh no, I only condemn them.
Oh,
they're
well.
horrible people. No, they're really
well. When
evil.
this is one of the things I love about them is that they'll watch these interviews. Oh, stop it!
I'll say it. Your dad is awesome, and your mom is awesome, and that I mean, there's a reason I brought up first thing. Just awesome people.
They brought a level of empathy and reason that I didn't in my adult life. I realized isn't as common.
Yeah,
and they made it clear how those two things did not have to contradict each other. And I just thought that was great. I mean, like in the book, I talk about Ben Shapiro's phrase, "Facts don't care about your feelings."
Right.
And even though I totally get what he's saying, I've been in the argument where I'm super frustrated that the person isn't accepting a reality just because they don't like it. But at the same time, it never sat that well with me because I do think there's empathy that you can insert into facts to make it so they're more palatable.
Of course.
Without upsetting the nature of facts.
You speak to someone in their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. So one of the things that I was worried about with this interview, and I was very delighted with the book, you talk in here that on Twitter you're very aggressive. And I'm aggressive on Twitter, but you were even more aggressive than me. But this book is written with a huge voice of humility. which seemed very sincere to me and seems sincere talking to you right now. Bridget Fedices, who's been a guest of mine, I was on her show. She speaks very highly of you. One of the things you talk about, this kind of light bulb moment for you, was there was this guy who was filming someone at Chick-fil-A, and you didn't even say this guy should get fired. You're just like, what a douche, I think was the exact tweet. And he had all these negative consequences. And for you, this was like a wake-up call. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I don't think it was a wake-up call immediately. What happened was, so first of all, my friend Bruce and I, we made a Chick-fil-A video, and it was really funny and fun. And this progressive made one that was just standoffish and mean to somebody who clearly didn't deserve it. Once the video got out, I did the typical Twitter thing. I think I said douchebaggery, thy name is this guy, or something,
Very King James.
Yes, I was trying to be eloquent. And I didn't keep up with what happened to him after that. I just knew he got fired. That was all I knew. And at the time, I said, once he got fired, and you can tell if you read what I said, it's me trying to feel better about the fact this guy just got fired.
Well, let's explain what happened. He went to Chick-fil-A.
Oh, yeah. He went to Chick-fil-A, and he started berating the Chick-fil-A drive-through person because she worked for a hate group, and, she's taking money from hateful people, and he's there to get a free water so that he can take money from them, and how do you live with yourself? And this lady was so sweet and nice and genuinely nice, not, faking it or being passive aggressive.
While being filmed by a bully.
Yeah. And she was even saying, I'm not comfortable being filmed. As he's pulling out, he suddenly is maybe realizing a little bit how this looked and said, hey, I'm not a bad guy, which anytime you're having to say that, you might want to think about whatever you just did. And what I try to make clear in the introduction, even as I regret my involvement in helping destroy his life, in a sense, he still got what he deserved. Like, he did this. This is the consequences of his actions. My involvement or not is irrelevant to whether or not he is fully guilty of what he has done. My issue was, after reading up on him years later and finding out how close to suicide he came, how he could not find a job, how he had 4 kids to feed, was, yes, he deserved this. They didn't. And, there could have been a consequence that didn't victimize them. I think he definitely deserved a consequence of some sort. But why did we have to go so far as to make it so these kids also suffered? And that made me realize that there's something wrong with the way I was approaching justice.
Have you toned down your antics on Twitter?
Depends on which antic you're talking about.
Of being like aggressive with people you disagree with. Because that's something you talk about several times in the book.
Yeah. I think for the last couple of years, 2016, I was extremely aggressive.
Yeah.
But I would say in recent years, I have had a kind of, I approach people in good faith position, but I'm happy to return bad faith.
Sure.
If they'd like to offer it. And when I return bad faith, I don't do it, or I try not to do it in a vicious, angry way.
Okay.
But I do try to be funny.
Okay.
And, not always a funny that person may like, but at least I'm trying to be humorous about it. I don't think that I start things anymore.
Okay.
Like I used to seek people out and
that's bad.
Try to hit them up.
Why do you where do you think that came from? Because that's not a healthy place to be.
Overwhelming and unbalanced sense of justice.
Okay.
I think it's very easy when you.
So you're a social justice warrior in your own way.
That's exactly right.
No, but psychologically, it was
psychologically.
Similar.
It's just when I see something, when I see bullying, for instance, there's just something inside me that I just want to do something about it, and I would get angry. I would get very angry, and so to me, and this is why I feel like I understand today's right as the way that I do, is to me it was like, give them what they're giving. Like, that was how I saw it. This guy's bullying. I'm going to bully him. And in a simplistic way, it kind of makes sense, Sometimes people do learn lessons that way, but sometimes they don't. And sometimes it just destroys people's lives and victimizes others. And it's like, if I want justice in those kinds of scenarios, and I'm rolling the dice that I might victimize other people, teach this guy nothing, and make the world a worse place, why is that worth it for the 25% chance that he's going to go, I'm sorry? It just didn't seem like it was working. And I wouldn't say that I'm incapable of doing it still, because it is a very human response.
Yeah.
And but I do try.
And you're a dad.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's also a guy.
Well, I was a dad back then too.
Well, sure. But I'm saying as a dad, not to bring up your family, but I mean, there's a part of you that's like, all right, I have to be moral modeling for my kids.
Well, there's a part
In
of
general,
me,
right?
I think there's just a part of me that thinks I may not be, who am I? I'm not going to change the world. But if enough people just worried about themselves in a way where they were trying, like I understand people are going to fail. I fail all the time.
Sure.
But I want to live in a world where people know that they fail and try not to, and accept that they can fail and try not to. I talk in the book a little bit about the idea that one of the biggest dangers I see in people, and especially in Christians, is this notion of righteousness, and the way that I put it, the editor actually commented on how many times I use the word garbage. And they were like, you want to just keep using garbage?
Well, at least he didn't use the word garbage.
Right.
Garbage.
Yeah, exactly. But because I can't, my whole idea was, I can be a garbage person. I'm capable of it. I've done it. And with no excuses. Because what people do is like, yeah, I can make mistakes, but here's the thing. Here's what I was going through at the time. And it's like, no, you can just be straight up garbage, and you need to accept that, because the moment that you think you're incapable of being garbage, you are garbage, like 100% garbage.
One of my favorite recent expressions is, yep, I'm back on my bullshit. I love that. It's like, yep, here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like,
What was it? I saw another one that was like, well, if it isn't my old friend, the consequences of my actions.
But let's talk about something else in here. So you talk about the roots of the American evangelical movement all the way back to, correctly, the Prohibition. Mm-hmm. What do you think of my thesis, which is the thesis of my book, The New Right, that contemporary progressivism, and since you're very learned about the history of religion in America, is a degeneration of the Wilsonian social gospel?
Well, Wilson, he was the father of progressivism in a lot of ways. And I think that the sneakiness of some of the language they use today is, because I don't make excuses for progressives.
Sure. No, you do not. You do not.
And I think a lot of the language that they use today are things he was more happy to just overtly say back then. He was willing to say that he wanted the Constitution to be a malleable and changeable thing, omitting originalism of any kind. He was, if I'm not mistaken, sedition started under his presidency, and a lot of what especially during the Bush years, during the Obama years, sedition suddenly became a thing again.
Oh yeah,
and they wouldn't call it that. They were trying to silence people, but they wouldn't call it sedition, because if they did that, then there's particular laws involved. And so your question is whether or not progressivism today is
a degeneration of the social gospel. So there's this quote by Mencken, which I'm going to get a little bit wrong, but the idea that Puritanism is the concern that someone somewhere is happy. And I think what they have discarded the Christian mythology, I'm not using the word in a pejorative sense, mythology and history, but the ethics of carry nation and the worldview that, their whole idea of the social gospel is salvation isn't through the individual soul, it's through a nation.
Right.
And you have to wipe out evil from coast to coast. Mm-hmm. And if there's someone somewhere who's evil, in this case, quote unquote, racist, and I don't mean racist you talk about this, there's actual racism and then how that term is used in bad faith. This is the same principle, just they've lost the historical Christian grounding.
So here's the issue for me. Because I know that the progressive Christian movement back then, the one that helped create Prohibition and cut the deal to get the income tax. Yeah. I know that they were certainly holding to those kind of social progressivism, that kind of idea. But the problem for me with identifying it as progressivism as perhaps coming from Christianity is that so much of American life back then and prior was built around, it was a very different Christianity nationwide at the time. Most people identified as Christian. So whether you were a progressive or a conservative at the time, you probably worked with your church and, identified as a Christian and named your ideas and policy proposals in a religious way.
Sure.
And yet there were people who were not for these progressive things. They were Christians too.
Sure.
So I don't feel like it comes from the church in that sense, but I do think it could certainly be abusively. You could abuse the gospel. You could abuse a lot of the Bible with progressive ideology and make it seem righteous.
Okay.
I think that's absolutely.
Okay. That's a great answer. I took a lot of notes. This book is very thought-provoking. Let's talk about you getting, as you talk about here, getting fired from Red State.
Yeah.
That must have been horrible.
Well, it first of all, I expected it.
Okay.
I didn't imagine it would be a mass firing.
Okay.
And then one of the other problems is I see it's sort of like if you break up with someone and a lot of your friends only know the outside and none of them saw it coming. I could see it coming. I was inside. I saw the way I was being asked to do things. I understand, and it's this delicate thing because I have friends who work there, and I understand they're not getting marching orders. You know what I mean? They're not being told, write positively about Trump. But they also wouldn't know what it's like to be writing negatively about Trump because they don't.
Right.
So my argument is, yeah, I was getting the messages you weren't. Because why would they have to send it to you? They wouldn't need to. It's not that Town Hall doesn't permit any criticism. It's that mine was probably amped up beyond what they were comfortable with. And look, they've got a business model, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. I mean, they're not pretending to be this unbiased organization that has no agenda. Yeah. And so I don't feel like they were dishonest about what they wanted, nor was it dishonest to want me to want me out because I wasn't doing that. What I thought was dishonest was that they didn't say that.
Right.
Like they should have just said that.
I'm guessing, I'm not trying to cause drama, but I'm going somewhere with this. Are you and Eric Erickson, who's the head of Red State, you don't talk?
I'm going to meet him on the battlefield and destroy him with an axe. No, we're friends.
Okay, you're friends.
Yeah.
I've been watching him get red-pilled on Twitter over the last couple of months.
It's so hard not to get red-pilled. It really is.
I disagree. I think it's easier not to get red-pilled.
Oh, dude, no.
What do you think red-pilled means?
Red-pilled is when you become fully entrenched in the new right and in the idea of social justice warriors destroying America.
No.
And what is your definition?
Tulsi Gabbard's red-pilled.
Okay.
Red-pilled is when you understand, just like it's much closer to that documentary, The Matrix, than you're making now, because it's not about right versus left. It's about when you understand that which is put forward in the press and in education as truth is in fact a carefully constructed narrative designed to control and limit conversation.
So where does the racial component come in? Because there's all talk all the time about the alt-right being the perpetrator.
Now we're getting to talk to my book, but very briefly, I always say you take one red pill, not the whole bottle. Mm-hmm. Because once you start being skeptical of what is being presented as fact, if someone doesn't grab you by the collar and yank you, you're going down that rabbit hole, and then you're in full-blown, Holocaust denial and whatever.
Okay, well then I agree. It's not hard not to swallow the red pill because I've always thought of the red pill as being the introduction to the alt-right, but not the actual alt-right.
Correct. It is. Right.
Okay.
So, but again, it is that you keep taking red pills, you're going to end up there. Right. So someone has to be like, whoa, let's just stop around here. Eric, but let me ask you.
What happens if you snort it? Is that faster?
We're going to find out in 45 minutes. My buddy Fire, he's coming down. He's got the razor blade.
Oh, CeeLo's going to come by and
he's got the mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's going to be sweet. We're going to be feeling like Hamilton. The question I have for you is, and I've had this argument with Sean Davis on Twitter, who's a co-head of the Federalist, who I'm sure you're friends with.
I'm not.
Oh, I'm sorry. You guys don't like each other? Okay.
I don't know if he doesn't like me. I don't like him.
Oh, okay. What's the issue with Sean?
I mean, okay, that was a bit harsh.
Okay.
It's not that I don't like him. It's that I find a lot of people that I had enjoyed their Twitter feeds and enjoyed reading them, who were pretty sympathetic to my point of view for a while in 2016. I feel like they found a way to survive, which was to make it the never media kind of. Everything's about the media coverage of Trump in a what about way.
Okay.
Because they don't have to directly defend Trump.
Correct.
They can simply attack the media for how they're doing it in contrast to how it used to be.
So that's the blue pill.
Oh, is it?
That's the blue pill. That that you're thinking it's about Trump, whereas the red pill is that the media is really. And I've had this argument with Sean. Sean thinks that they're dumb. I think that they're evil, and I think that they are genuinely fomenting really nefarious things.
Broadly, I don't agree.
Okay.
Definitely, there are some. I mean, I think it would be hard to call them many unless I knew what I was comparing it to.
Well, I'm saying systemically and for a long time.
Systemically? I don't agree with dumb.
Right.
I
I don't think it's indefensible because they're all educated.
They're
Education
educated.
correlates with intelligence.
I think that the problem. See, I see a global problem, and it infects every aspect of life. Politics, media, Hollywood, everywhere, which is self-delusion. And so
Sure.
you can be highly intelligent and have self-delusion.
Yeah. And in fact, the smarter you are, the more likely it is, I would guess.
Because you can talk yourself into anything.
Yes, yeah.
And so what I see more is it's less evil, it's more self-delusion, and usually in a way where they're trying to feel like they're doing something good with their lives. So it's hard for me to call somebody evil. Like I didn't call any of the evangelicals in the book evil.
Right.
Because it's hard for me to call somebody evil if they think they're doing something good. I just want to shake them out of their self-delusion. And when it comes to the media, I think a lot of them, when I've talked to some of them before and they use terms around me or speak about things, it's like it's not occurring to them. I know they're not dumb, but it's just they can't comprehend. Well, no, I mean, we all agree on this, right? And like,
Sure.
they're so certain. And I'm like, no, I don't. Why would you think I do? Because to them, it's not left versus right. It's just right versus wrong.
Correct. But I mean, to me, when you are, that makes you a jihadi.
Well, you can have an evil act. Well, actually, let me back up. No, because I think that and this may be my religion coming out.
Sure.
I'm sure it is, actually. I subscribe to C.S. Lewis's view on this, that there is a inherent programmed morality in us.
Okay.
And that we, for whatever reason, we just know when it comes to certain things, what is right and what is wrong.
Okay.
And then there is a whole playground of stuff that isn't so obvious.
Sure.
And it's in that playground of stuff that isn't so obvious that these differences come up and the self-delusions come up. But you can't self-delude, in my opinion, about sawing somebody's head off while they're screaming for their life.
Sure.
Now, could you self-delude about somebody you killed when there may have been another way? Probably. But not when you're sawing somebody's head off while they're screaming for their life. Like, the contrast.
So
at
here's
that
how
point.
I see it. Just like with totalitarian states, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would not be the ones sawing the head, but they would be applauding or looking the other way when the head is being sawed off.
I mean, I consider Abu Musab al-Zarqawi to be fairly foot soldierish. And when he was still alive, he was the one sawing these people's heads off. He was injured from fighting in the Afghanistan war. And I don't think that he deluded himself into believing that what he was doing wasn't murder. I think the only thing that he deluded himself into believing was that Allah wanted him to do it.
So if you could tell my audience, who are often heathens,
Yes.
one Bible verse to read, what would it be?
Well, it's interesting. I did a Bible study this morning, and I've always liked these particular verses.
Okay.
And it just felt really right for today. And I texted it to myself so I remember it.
Cool.
Who is wise and understanding? I'm sorry. It's James 3:13 through 18.
Okay.
Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth.
I like that.
Yeah. It's just the idea that wisdom comes when it is freely given without ego, basically. And when you are allowing God to guide your words instead of trying to contort them for your own purposes.
It reminds me of the Thatcher quote, in which she said, being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't. Mm-hmm. And it's like being smart is like being a lady. Let the word speak. This person doesn't have to think you're smart or awesome.
Right.
Let the idea come across. And a lot of times people who aren't that bright are going to have a great idea. So be humble enough to listen.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Let me tell you guys about Monday.com. And if you go to Monday.com/welcome, you get a free 14-day trial. Here is how it works. If you're like me, everyone that you work with drives you crazy, right? So what you do with Monday.com, it's a team management tool. It takes no time to set up. You can customize it. It's a way to organize and find files, and it creates accountability. So everyone's on this site. You assign tasks. That person updates the task. Oh, can you do this paper? Here's how the trajectory is going, and here's where the paper is. You can look for yourself. It's very intuitive, very easy to follow, and you don't have to be, if you're like me, like, hey, what's going on with this? Did you make the ad? Did you make the graphic for next week's show? It's been assigned, working on it, and you could look over people's shoulders without literally looking over your shoulder, and it'll give you peace of mind, and it'll keep everything organized, and everyone will know what everyone else is doing without feeling like they're in a cubicle farm. If you go to Monday.com/welcome, they're going to give you a free 14-day trial. There's no commitment. It's Monday.com/. Do you agree that they would regard, the average corporate journalist would regard anyone to the right of Mitch McConnell as effectively being alt-right or a Nazi?
I would start a little to the left of Mitch.
Okay, so we're on the same page there. Okay, let's see where you and I disagree, right?
Okay.
Do you disagree that if they had these druthers, these people would be, however you want to define this word, vanished from this country?
Yeah, I mean, I even said at the end of my book that basically a lot of people are waiting for this ideology to die, literally. Like
Right.
they want these people to die.
Right. They want you dead.
No.
Or they'll be happy if you were dead.
They are content to hold the line until it dies out because they have an unrealistic understanding of these ideologies. They think this is so radical that it's like Nazism in the 40s and will go away. Mostly go away.
Sure.
And so they're like, no, this is gonna. It's like, no, this is not as extreme as you're saying, and is two sides of a coin that's been around for way longer than any of us. It's not going to disappear with half the population dying. It's going to. You're going to have to find a middle ground, or it's going to be war someday.
Or peaceful segregation.
Or peaceful segregation, or an amicable divorce.
Yes, which is the goal. That's my goal.
That's your goal?
That's the goal. So name me someone who would be regarded as like radioactive, just so I can use them as an example to ask you some questions.
Richard Spencer?
Okay, well, let's someone less radioactive.
So that's more like gamma radiation?
Yeah.
Okay. So just radioactive?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm blanking out.
Okay, let's say Milo.
I'm pulling a Rick Perry.
Like, let's say Milo, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a great example.
Do you think most of these corporate journalists would, do you think they value his life?
No.
Okay.
But, I mean, I don't think most people on the right, I could name people that I don't think most people on the right value their life. I mean,
Their own
certainly.
life, you mean?
No, the lives of certain figures on the left. I mean, certainly when Hugo Chavez died.
I don't mean Hugo Chavez. I mean someone who doesn't have.
All right, but even less radioactive. I mean, I've seen the things that people say when somebody does die, somebody that's only as radioactive as Milo, and they're as grotesque as anything I've seen from the left.
I think that's awful.
It is awful. I'm not whatabouting.
Oh no, I'm not arguing with you. I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, if the standard for evil or to compare them to jihadis would be the unfortunate but fairly common view of not caring that somebody you think is evil dies, then everybody's a jihadist. And I just don't think everybody is, because I've celebrated deaths of people. I mean, like Hugo Chavez and Osama bin Laden.
Well, but again, those guys had blood on their hands.
Right. But the fact that my bar is higher doesn't change what my motivation is.
I disagree.
I think the bar matters?
Yes, I think the bar does matter, because it's one thing, like, for example, Jeffrey Epstein, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is glib, but it's true. One monster's gone from this earth.
Right.
So I'm a little bit glad about that, even though I'm not happy with these circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
If, say, someone from Vox dies,
Mm-hmm.
and they're young, I feel awful.
Look, I wouldn't do this anymore, but like, just as an example, I used to every year on Ted Kennedy's death anniversary, I would congratulate Ted Kennedy for another year sober. Okay.
Oh my God.
Right. Yeah. You're trying not to laugh, and I see it.
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm
it's gross.
honestly not.
It's gross. It's gross. And it was weird how that changed in me was when Osama bin Laden died, because I was happy, and then I started to feel the weight of what I was celebrating. And sometimes I tweet things not because I think them, but because I want to think them.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I know what that's
And
like.
so I tweeted, I'm celebrating God's weeping. That's why he's God and I'm me.
Yeah.
You know, and it made me think back on things that I had done like that, where I was treating a person like a, I don't know what, like a fixture, like just like a table or something,
yeah.
not a real person with real family and grandkids and all kinds of. Same thing happened, which I talk about in the book with Michael Brown. You know,
Right.
I did see the Michael Brown versus Wilson thing in stark factual terms, but why did I need to speak about it the way I did, as though his life was inconsequential and worthless? It wasn't. And but the fact that I've come to that realization doesn't change the fact that I have done things like that. And I don't think I'm a jihadi. I do understand.
I don't think you're a jihadi.
No, I know you don't think that. But what I'm saying is I think if I'm capable of that, certainly other people are, and everybody's at their different moments in their life. And I'm just not ready to condemn the media, for instance. Maybe a lot of them do hold that idea. But as somebody who has at one time held that idea and seen people I respect espouse those types of ideas without realizing the horror of what they're saying, really, because you get people into an individual situation, and it always changes. If you get people to speak to each other, it does always change. You know, there was Patton Oswalt, some MAGA guy, you know, yelled at him about something, and then he sent his forces on the guy, and then Patton just looked at his bio, saw there was a GoFundMe, that the guy was hurting, and he was in the hospital. So he turned it around and asked his followers to help him. And that guy responded with humility and was like, you know, you guys have really given me a wake-up call. Like, he didn't change his mind on politics, but they realized this guy was human. He realized Patton was human. I don't think it's that they were both jihadis before that happened.
Let me ask you your opinion of something I've started doing on Twitter.
Okay.
So I am different from you because I'm a lot more...
Like Ben Shapiro?
Dark side.
Oh, okay.
I was so proud of that.
So you can just do that anytime. You just press a button.
Yeah, that's why you're not allowed to talk to the staff. I pressed the button again, Nate. God.
I wonder if the whole thing where you press the button the second time and it didn't work, was that like the scenes we didn't see in Star Wars?
It was God's will.
You know, like when Star Wars, when Vader and the Emperor, we always saw like the perfect of coming together of his evil. But were there other times where he was like, Lord, you know, and like pushed the button? Right. He's like, I need to go lay down.
Yeah, this ventilator. Oh, my ventilator is full of lint. A lot of times people come at me on Twitter, right? And since I
find that shocking,
and since I'm a troll, they will often take things I say at face value, even though it's pretty obvious. Like, for example, I tweeted over the weekend, CNN : Trump's racist rhetoric is so extreme that a old Jewish man died in prison. And people are like, oh, you've never really heard racist rhetoric. I'm like, it says CNN in all caps. It's one sentence. How are you missing this? What I started doing is when people are particularly personal with me, I respond by saying, you know what? People send me money to waste on crap I don't even want just to spite dipshits like you, pardon my French. And they'll start PayPaling me stuff, and I put up the receipts, and with that, I buy garbage.
How do I get this gig?
Well, see, you had to be a little more dark-sided.
Oh, okay.
See, that's the trick. You don't even need the button. That's how powerful I got.
That was pretty impressive. That was some force using.
But the thing is, that person, through their bad behavior, has now benefited my life. And the more they talk, the more people send money. And the point is, I have to spend this money on something completely useless and stupid, right?
I'm curious why.
Why what?
Why do you do all of that?
It's teaching them a lesson. And so that's what I'm asking you. What do you think of that whole idea? Is that something you approve of? Because that's kind of the inverse of the Patton Oswalt. Instead of Patton giving that guy money, they're causing people to give me money to waste.
I don't think people learn lessons that way. I just don't.
Interesting.
I mean, I think
They shut up really quick, often.
they shut up, but I think that that's more like when somebody gets quiet so they can either plot how they're going to overcome whatever you've done that's pissed them off, or they're cowering.
Yeah,
But I don't
that's
think
fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but I don't think that they walk away going, "Huh, that's a really good point. I should stop doing
Oh
that."
no. Oh, well, they stop with me at least.
Well, and I would say that if there is a lesson you're teaching them, it is individual to you.
Good,
But it is,
I'm fine with
but
that.
it's not. They're not learning anything about their behavior.
Okay.
If that's part of what you want to teach them.
No,
I don't think they're-
I just want like
the only behavior modification is that they're going to leave you alone.
I'm okay with that.
Right.
So here's something where I really disagreed with you about, and I want to suss out your thinking. I think this becomes between being a Christian and not being a Christian. You say there's only one goal for a Christian, and that is to surrender the script.
Yes.
To stop trying to write it, to allow God to unfold the story, and never assume we know where it's headed. When for me, and maybe I'm taking things out of context and it being disproportionate, when I see this word surrender, and that is essential to being a Christian.
Yes.
It's in His hands. That's the Christian message. When you apply that to politics, that to me sends chills up my spine.
But I spend most of the book explaining why, as an individual, you should be making decisions about the world, in the world. It should have to do with the world. And one of the examples I gave was I don't ask God which way to put the toilet paper in the bathroom.
Sure.
It's
over.
We'll talk about that
It's
later.
clearly
No,
over.
It is over.
It's clearly over.
It is.
Then it's closer to you. Why would it want it further away? It makes no sense.
It doesn't. And honestly, I could start a whole church just around that. But to me,
I think some people already have. Am I
if they
right?
have, I'm down for it.
There's some shitty churches out there.
Yeah, if Trump came out about that, forget it. I'm in. Like I'm done. I'm done complaining. I'll buy.
Don't be Ben Howe,
Right.
whose terrible book that no one likes.
By the way, the trolling that is an instinct for me too.
Yeah.
Because somebody said something to me today, and I just had this whole vision in my head. I was like, what if you wrote a book and it got some people upset, and then you had a conversion moment publicly where now you're rejecting your own book, and so you go around encouraging people, buy as many copies as you can so we can have a burning.
Yeah.
And you're just selling books.
Yeah, someone happened over the weekend. Someone goes, the only reason I'd buy your book is to burn it. And I'm like, okay, what do I get? It's your property.
Right.
I'm a property rights person, number one. Number two, I just replied to go, we both know you're not buying books.
By the way, how far do you go with your property right? Because I'll tell you right now,
100%.
if somebody bought my book and then changed the artwork on the front and did a bunch of other stuff and then sold it on eBay for $1,000, that's fine with me. I think they created a new work.
Ben, my friend, they're not selling it for $1,000.
Fair point. We'll throw there's $999 in the fold of the book, and that's why. So.
That's fine. You would have a problem with that?
No, I'm saying I don't. I believe.
admirable.
Yeah, I believe in new work when it comes to copyright.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't. You know that, right? Like a ton of people.
Well, I'm an anarchist, so we don't believe in IP as a rule.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I worked in IP for like 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that means
You are
anything.
You do talk about being a sinful person throughout the book. It's
fair.
One of the things I can't. So please tell me more about this whole thing about surrender.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to get off subject. I spent most of the book talking about how, as an individual, we need to let our religion guide us in terms of doing what's right and doing what's wrong. But what you're going to do right or wrong about a worldly thing is going to be worldly. Like, in other words, you shouldn't, and I'm not suggesting you pull the lever so God can do something. You pull the lever because in the context of the world, this makes sense to you. They're going to do policies I like or whatever it is. Okay? It's when you pull the lever despite knowing that there are other things, eternal things that you are defying in order to do this, that's when it's a problem. So when I say surrender the script, I'm talking about what I mention a lot, which is you follow the means that God has laid out, which are often practical advice about just being a good person.
Oh, yeah.
And you let go of the ends. And the reason you have to let go of the ends is not because you don't work towards one or you don't expect, or not expect, but you don't desire a particular end. But when you become so committed to the ends that you're willing to defy the means to get there, then you've made an error. And that's what that's what I object to. So the script is the ends. That's the script. The script is, where is this heading? You may be in college and a great baseball player and have every reason in the world to think that you're going to get into the MLB and then that's going to be your life, and then things might change and you have a car accident. You can spend your life chasing an end that is increasingly less likely, or you can start considering how you're going to live your life in a way and accept that God has other ends for you than what you expected.
So if you could tell my audience, who are often heathens,
Yes,
one Bible verse to read, what would it be?
well, it's interesting. This morning I did a Bible study, and I read something. I mean, I've read it many times, but I didn't want to forget it because it felt important to today. Because I'm doing the book interview and everything.
Sure.
Very specifically, though, I felt like this was relevant. It's Proverbs 5:19. May her breasts satisfy you always. May you ever be ravished with her love.
I love that quote.
Yeah. I mean, it really does just comport so well with everything I'm doing today.
Michael Malice here. I want to tell you guys about Wix.com, which is sponsoring today's episode. If you go to letthatbeyourwelcome.com, you can see it was created using Wix. What's Wix? Wix is, if you know how to use PowerPoint, you know how to make a website. Everyone should have their own website. People are going to Google you, whether they're from Tinder or from that job interview. You want to have your domain name and you want to have a site. And with Wix, it's really easy to set up. They've got all these templates to choose from. If you don't know a template to use, they've got artificial design intelligence, ADI. It takes a few minutes, and then you'll be the top Google result. If you go to letthatbeyourwelcome.com and click on the link at the bottom, you get 10% off any premium plan. Wix is something that I think hundreds of thousands of people have used to create their own website, and you should do so as well. Malice here. Let me tell you guys about Blinkist. With Blinkist, you get unlimited, I don't like limits, access to a massive library of condensed non-fiction books. If you go to Blinkist, blinkist.com/malice, you get a free 7-day trial. What is it? There's all these books out there that are terrible because you don't need to read a 300-page book to get the point. That's what they do. They take a book, they condense it down to 15 minutes. So when you're at that party, you're on Facebook, you're online, job interview. Oh yeah, I read Blink. Oh yeah, it's about this, blah, blah, blah. Because those books can be condensed, and that's what the site does. If you go to blinkist.com/malice, you get a free 7-day trial. All the books are there. Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. The Michael Wolff's books, Michelle Obama's books, Tim Ferriss's books, Dale Carnegie. They've got a library of the old popular ones and the stuff that's coming out now that everyone's buzzing about. You go to blinkist.com/malice, you get a free 7-day trial. One of the things that you kind of touched on, I've given a couple talks on networking, and you talk about doing good deeds or whatever. I always tell people, if someone's in town, as an example, and it's their birthday and they're not doing anything, take them out. And I say, do it for yourself. And they laugh. And I go, no. The person who takes people out for their birthday is an awesome guy. Mm-hmm. That could be you. It's not that hard. And people don't realize how easy it is to be an awesome person. It takes really, really, really little to be kind and do a nice thing. And you don't have to put on a banquet for someone.
Do you have kids too?
No, I don't.
Because this is the kind of thing that... and I have no problem admitting this. I admitted this in another interview. Some people, they didn't have to have kids to realize some of the things that I've realized. Some people didn't have to have, if you saw the interview I did with Matt Lewis, there's other background to why things have gone the way they have for me the last year. I had personal crisis, family crisis, problems, tragedy in a way. And I needed all of those things because some people only need a tap on the shoulder and some people need a piano dropped on their head. And I'm just one of those people that needs a piano dropped on my head. I don't think it makes me worse than people who don't. But
you get told this on Twitter every day, though.
Yeah, it's true. But like for you, for instance, like the value you're describing is the kind of value that I'm learning as a result of having kids. I don't think I had that value before. I think that people thought I was nice and it was fine. Like I wasn't a terrible guy or anything, but I wasn't the guy to take somebody out, for their birthday.
And it's not even that people are nasty. It's that they just don't think of themselves.
They just don't think of it.
Yeah, and it's just like just a little bit of I think me and you. I'm gonna get pedantic, and I apologize.
Mm-hmm.
You use the word empathy in this book. I think when you mean I would use the word sympathy, but I use empathy in like put yourself in someone else's shoes. And for example,
I'm going to change your life right now.
Let me just finish this one sentence.
Yeah.
Having you on, I'm like, yeah, his book's coming out today. I know what that feels like. Like if I could do anything and it's a book that I find of value, that's great. I want to be that person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you sent me that note, it was exactly what you intended that you talked about earlier. The fact that because somebody else did that too. The John from CNN New Day. You know as well as I do, when you send the book out to people, how many people do you think read it?
Right. It's radio silence.
Right. And like,
oh, it looks interesting.
And they'll bring you
they'll
on.
read the blurb.
They'll bring you on and they'll talk about the book. And like in my head, this hasn't happened today. I'm not talking about interviews I've done today, but just in the past, it's like, you didn't read it. Like, this person didn't. But when you get a special note from someone, they didn't have to send it. You didn't have to send it. John didn't have to send it. It was just a way of telling me I am actually reading this. You know what I mean? And that's meaningful because criticism is fine. I don't mind getting criticism.
Of course.
What I mind is bad faith. Bad faith drives me nuts. And if I was doing an interview with you and it was clear you hadn't read it, but you were arguing these points that we've argued today, it would have been a different interview.
Here's the biggest issue I have with Christianity.
But wait, I want to see if you liked my answer on the scripting.
I do like that answer.
Okay.
And I don't agree with it.
Okay.
But I think it's a fair answer.
But it just makes sense to you, though.
Yeah. I mean, this whole idea that if God is perfectly happy that America is going to get like destroyed, like, well, that's what he wants.
I mean, there's one of the things that is excluded a lot when describing thoughts like that is we can always use possibilities in order to discredit something. Like, Donald Trump could nuke everyone on Earth.
Sure.
I don't think he's going to.
Right.
And one of the reasons I don't think he's going to is because despite his many character flaws, I see character flaw limitations. And so when it comes to God, I think a lot of times people will say, hey, even if it was, the United States had to be destroyed, if that's God's will. But that doesn't mean it's in God's character necessarily to put us in a position that horrible without, a long period of time of being able to turn back. I mean, in Nineveh, with Jonah, he didn't go Sodom and Gomorrah on that place.
Right.
He sent Jonah in, and Jonah wanted to destroy them. And God was the one that was like, no, I'm giving them a chance. So I think that there is a character that is displayed in the Bible. And I understand, people are going to come, oh, what about slavery? And they told,
right,
take the children and all that. Yeah, there's huge theological debates about all of those things, and that's fine. But I have a relationship with God. And I believe in that relationship, and I believe I know his character, at least as it relates to the relationship with me.
You talk about Trump being Machiavellian in the sense that you don't use this. I think you pointedly don't use this expression, but that the evangelical Christians have made a deal with the devil by working with Trump, right? That he's doing things that they know are despicable.
I think that it would not be accurate to say because they're working with Trump.
Right.
I think the deal with the devil is that they merged faith with republicanism.
Sure. Do you not see that his means are actually a lot better than his ends, in that he is encouraging people to have contempt for people who need to be treated with contempt, who use their false sense of prestige to get over very many evil things?
I think that the issue of why I won't agree with what you're saying really just comes from our opposing baselines of what we consider the means. Like what are good means. Mine are instructed by something and yours are instructed by something else.
I'm saying when he is speaking derisively and insultingly, at very low class and offensive.
And
incitingly towards some truly despicable people, is that a bad means? I think it's an eye-opening good means.
I don't think it's an eye-opening good means.
If you, let's talk, okay, do you disagree that the corporate media has for over a century been very integral to fomenting war? When Trump bombed Syria, that's the first time he's presidential.
I think
is the example.
So just let me put words in your mouth and see if they're right. But so you'd be referring to, for instance, in World War II or in the lead up to World War II, the newsreels that were offered before the movies were very propagandish and things like that.
I'm talking about things like...
Or the Iraq War.
Right now, we were told during the campaign that Trump, due to his temper, is going to get us into World War III. He's going to nuke everybody, right? The fact that we're not at war with Russia and that we're not starting World War III, that we're not more involved in Yemen, in Syria, to them is disgraceful. And when he bombed Syria, that's the first time he's discussed, oh, he's finally presidential today.
I don't know, because this seems more often to be associated with partisan ideology in terms of when people are for or against war.
But to me, that's the myth.
Well, I mean, Sean Hannity was definitely against actions that Bill Clinton was taking.
Sure.
Towards the end of his presidency.
I'm talking about the press,
which he was fine. No. Okay. I mean, I know that he's an opinion person, but I'm using him to highlight that, like, it switched back and forth. But he did it overtly because he's an opinion, because his opinions are known.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is, my experience has been the media, who are more veiled about that bias, did the same thing, just in the reverse from Sean Hannity. And so I don't know that I would say that their intent would have been war as much as their intent was either to hold up a Democrat or put down a Republican.
Do you see what they're doing to Tulsi?
I do. But again, the fact that these things end with those results doesn't mean that was why they were doing it. They'll use whatever avenue, and I'm not just including the media here. Democrats will use whatever avenue to get the person they want to win the primaries. If they think she's a threat to who they want, which is either, Biden or Kamala Harris or something, they'll take whatever avenues they have to. And I mean, the birther thing started in Hillary land, because the important thing was stopping Obama from winning the primaries. And then later, there's these racial motives added to it. But the one consistent thing, whether it's birther stuff and where it started, or where the what's the document called that started with Hillary and then the Free Beacon and
but the dossier,
the
P-tape,
the Iraq War, Afghanistan's prolonged status, all of those things, they're all different with different moving pieces and different motivations, except one, which is partisanship. Partisanship guides all of it. They don't care if there's a war or there's not a war. They care about their partisan victory.
This is where you and I disagree, and that's a whole other conversation. I think the partisanship is the consequence of the ideology, and that they would just as soon have a Republican who's doing what they want as a Democrat.
Oh, man. Yeah, we definitely
completely disagree. So if you could tell my audience, who are often heathens, one Bible verse to read, what would it be?
Well, it's interesting. I actually, this morning I did a Bible study, and I got a verse that meant a lot to me.
Okay.
I've read it before, but it has to do with sin. It's Romans 14:4. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To his own master he stands or falls. The idea being that the master is the temptation that this person struggles with, that they are a servant to. And that when people spend more time or undue time scolding others over their particular temptations while ignoring their own, they should shut their face.
Keep your house clean first.
Yeah.
There's you have a lot to worry about in your own life.
Yeah.
And then you could look over that fence. I think that's a great lesson to teach people.
Absolutely.
The last thing, and this is something that I can't wrap my head around.
Yes, I am this good looking.
Sweetheart, I can wrap my head around that pretty easily. The idea that we are all sinners and that, everyone is equal. It just does not resonate to me on any level. Okay. And I don't understand how, and I'm sure you don't do this consistently by your own admission, how you can look at every single person that you encounter and be like, this person is the same as me in a moral sense.
Well, that's because that's not exactly the view.
Okay.
Each person is the same in the sense that we have our personal temptations, history, brokenness, or whatever instructs what we do. each of us is the same in the sense that we have to reach inside of ourselves to prevent ourselves from giving into those temptations and to not giving into bitterness and all that stuff. No matter if you are a mass murderer or just a dad who sometimes gets mad at his kids, you're operationally doing the same thing. Okay? But the morality that you're talking about is clearly different.
Sure.
Okay? The murderer is clearly doing worse things than the dad. Okay? The sameness is that these individuals, they have different struggles, they have different sins, and they certainly have a different capacity for either giving into evil or trying to be good.
Sure.
And so they will be different people, and one will objectively be more evil than the other.
Okay.
But they are both created with the same level of ability to control their temptations and to not give into them. Somebody out there is tempted to murder people and never has. Okay? That person is not all that far off from the actual murderer. The only difference is he didn't do it. But that's proof that there is such a thing as fighting even a temptation of that much horror. You know what I mean?
Do you think this is? I love asking questions where I have no idea how the person is going to answer because I have a pretty good idea of how you think.
Peaches.
I think. No, this is not a peaches question.
Okay.
It's not a cream question either. Do you think it is evil to be a prosecutor and incarcerate harmless human beings?
I mean, harmless. Who's deciding it's harmless?
Kamala Harris putting away people who are drug offenders,
Okay, so, but what I'm saying
non-violent
is,
criminals.
but what I'm saying is, you're using a determination to decide that they are or are not harmless. Surely you're not saying somebody who is a drug user is by definition harmless. I mean, there
Well, they're
can be
not by
harmful.
definition harmful.
Well,
Definitionally, neither.
There could be a harmful one.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely. I'm
you
saying
know.
specifically a harmless one.
Okay. I guess the only reason I'm struggling, I'm not trying to not answer.
No, I got you.
The only reason I'm struggling to answer is because the identifier of harmless is very hypothetical. It's very broad. Do I want harmless people who literally don't deserve to go to jail go to jail? No. And in fact, you wouldn't even have to use harmless people. You could use innocent people. I don't want innocent people to go to jail either.
Of course.
But do
you think it's evil to enforce unjust law?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, like for instance, go larger. I've never thought I was just following orders is an okay thing to say. I mean,
Yeah, you talk about that in the book.
Yeah,
And how it's just insane for especially a Christian to just invoke this and just shrug it off and try to ground it in the Bible.
Right. No, I definitely think that you can, but that's part of the thing about if you want to understand what I mean by surrendering the script, that's what I'm talking about. What's going to happen to you when you're in the military and they're asking you to do something that you shouldn't do and you know you shouldn't do it? Yeah, there are going to be earthly consequences. You're going to go to jail. You're going to go to the brig.
Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
Sure,
it's going to be bad news.
Is that the one I'm thinking of?
And the trust part is going to be do the right thing anyway.
Yes.
You don't know the ends, but you better do the right thing anyway.
Yes.
That's what I mean by that.
We're running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Definitely the dark side, and it for two reasons. One is because, and I'll give a real answer in a second. One is because it's cool, but second is because it gives me motivation in my life for things that I want to achieve, and I just want to thank you for giving that to me. Okay,
you are welcome.